to add stuff, Terry, until we get through the first one.
Okay, it's on.
Very good.
We're live.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to our February 11, 2025 curriculum meeting. It is 3:31. Close enough. We'll call to order. We'll introduce
Jeff Hanley.
Joanne O'Brien.
Linda Caputo.
Alyssa Tracy.
Megan Carlson.
Thank you very much. And our administrative staff, we have Terry behind the scenes, and
Angela Hardy, Director of Curriculum.
thank you. All right,
Thank you.
yeah.
So we have two agenda items. Our first one is consideration of a new math course, which is the financial algebra one. So that was included in with your agenda last week when we sent it out. So I want to be able to take a moment to discuss that. Lindsay Bickford is here. She's our math coach. We've shifted her to the 6 through 12 range. And she's been doing some work with the math staff at looking at our course options, and I don't know how to meet the students' needs best and ensure pathways for them based on their interests to help in their investment in math education. So Lindsay, do you want to jump in, and then I can add further context as questions arise. In the packet you got is a description of the course. I took out a lot of the instructional details that are much more, but this gives you a broad, a course description, but it also gives you a description of every single unit of study. All the standards that they're aligned to, the supporting instructional materials. I thought you would like to see that. The credits and the initial cost. Yeah, that's what I included.
So I did like a nitty-gritty overview to like go through some of the highlights. So this financial algebra proposal comes from the textbook itself. The company, myself and two of the high school math teachers attended a webinar, full day, learning about this financial algebra curriculum. And so there is a third edition coming out, which is what we're looking to use because it has all the tax code updates and all of the stuff for the recent. And we were supposed to have a sample by last month, but the production got delayed, so it's not gonna be out till next month, so I couldn't like bring for you guys to see. But it covers math topics from Algebra 2, statistics, probability, pre-calc, and calc, but teaches them through a focus on finance. So the units that we would look at teaching are banking, investing, credit, employment and income taxes, and then automobile ownership. There are other units of study that if we decided to tweak it over time, there are some other options in there. But those were the key ones that we thought all students could really benefit from if they chose to take the course. It also addresses the personal finance and economic social studies standards at the high school level. So it's wrapping in and doing some cross content. There is an online textbook, which I now joining the high school this year, I'm hearing how a lot of the kids when they graduate high school are going into colleges and most of their textbooks are online and they have no experience on how to use them online because we've never done it. So students taking this course would have the opportunity to learn from a teacher how to use an online textbook before we send them off to college, which would be fantastic. So that part for the online textbook is called MindTap. It has all of it online and the teacher can assign assignments through there. Students can check their work. They can have the app on their phone if they needed to, if they're at home. It does flashcards, note taking, and it does like all kinds of things. So we would look at getting licenses for that. We tried to keep it minimal cost. We would look at getting one student textbook. So if for some reason a student didn't have access to technology, we had that available. The student workbooks, we would want at least one so that we could use that to make our own stuff. And then financial algebra, the annotated instructors edition, we need a teacher book. And then the MindGap licenses is where most of the cost would come in, but we assumed 25 licenses for a year and they're $50. So around $1,653. I don't know if there's tax.
And in terms of like costs, ongoing costs, that's actually very minimal compared to most of our programs and costs. So that is trying to give you some context there. And in terms of course sequence for students.
Yeah.
This would be available to juniors and seniors. We considered having it optional for sophomores, which that could still potentially, but some of the topics we felt like probably weren't really gonna be applicable at sophomore and to wait till they're juniors and seniors. But they could take it alongside like geometry or some of the other classes, so you could double up on math classes and still do that.
So typically, students will come into the high school and start with Algebra 1. There's a handful of students who come in having placed out of Algebra 1, taking it in 8th grade. But generally, they take Algebra 1. And so that's a prerequisite for this course. You really need to have that foundation first. Then they typically take geometry. And then they typically take Algebra 2, although that is now optional. We have some pathways, and I have a whole document on that if we need to pull it up. But you'll see it when we do our program of studies review next month also. So students could take, they're required to take 3 credits of math. They're required to take Algebra 1 and geometry. Then they have a third choice. So this would be one of their choices. So they could take Algebra 1, geometry at the same time as taking financial algebra if they wanted to get ahead the following year in more math classes because they're very math inclined. If they're less math inclined but curious, especially around the financial aspects, this could be their third math class. So I think that is enticing. In addition, financial literacy has been of great concern in the nation and in our state. The legislature is always looking at ways to add it as a requirement. We already have it as a requirement in our school system. So while Lindsay referenced social studies standards that have to do with economics, we reference career and preparation standards and require our students to take college and career prep. I don't think that's the name. I just lost the name, but it's their
Tech.
it's their sophomore year.
Yeah.
It used to be junior year, but with recommendations from this committee and students, we moved it to sophomore year. And that's typically taught by Patricia Morris right now. And that they do actually do some tax preparation practice. They do a lot of different financial they do 2 things. They do a college exploration process, and then they kind of do this careers process that has to do with finances.
Oops.
It's all right, we'll wait.
And then that one is the one we just did a college prep course of too, right?
Yeah.
And we were doing more than they needed, if I recall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then junior year, they do life and work, which used to be
That's
senior
right.
year.
Okay.
And so there's another layer on top around like personal finances. So we end up having 2 semesters that have elements of personal finance that every single student is required to take. The difference here is this is very directly connected to mathematics, and it's going to go in much more depth about the mathematical implications related to credit and financing and banking, and I have to look again. I read it all. So income taxes and those sorts of things. That's sort of how that plays out. So we do have financial literacy. This would be another option for students to strengthen that skill set. And it might also be an option for some students who would find greater interest in math through this lens rather than the typical math class.
And the nice thing about like this course, you don't necessarily have to be going for like, oh, I'm gonna be an engineer. Like this is good for anybody, even if you just wanna pick up and start a job after high school. Great, you still kind of need to know some of these things.
Do you
So-
think that, like, is the name recommended? I just don't know unless students read the whole description that they're gonna know that's what it is. I mean, I find it intriguing because for all the reasons you just mentioned, right? But if it says financial algebra, do you think they get that's what it is? Just a question.
Right.
Yeah,
Good question.
yeah.
Does it need a little tagline or something?
Yeah.
What made you select this? Did someone come to you with this proposal, or did you find it?
We attended the webinar because we were interested in looking at a financial algebra option, and this has everything already built in for us. with all the tools that we would need, and it gives the updates as tax codes update.
One of the
So,
things
yeah, go
I
ahead.
find interesting and positive about this is it says this maximizes the chances for success for students who might not have succeeded in Algebra 2. So this is an alternate for Algebra 2. And the
Mhm.
other thing is, when am I ever gonna use this? Boom. How can they ask that
Right.
question?
Automobile ownership is one of the ones people rattle off right away with
And-
that,
and
right?
And the other thing that I really liked was that you're going to construct, question, model, and interpret. This is an action-based math plan. You're not going to do 72 equations every night and solve for X.
Right.
And I think that this is
Yeah.
what's going to appeal to students because it relates to their life.
Have you seen any examples of it? The material, the actual material itself?
Yes, we saw it during the webinar.
How, I mean, I took algebra, I took geometry. Algebra 2 was a nightmare. But in my wildest dreams, I can't see how you can intertwine algebra and a checkbook. And I don't see this
It's not a
happening.
checkbook, that's just
No, but I mean,
computation.
it's one of the.
No, it's
one of the things
calculating
that-
its amortization tables, it's calculating insurance, interest over time, what you're paying, it's all of those formulas that you can get on your computer, or at these websites, but then you're actually doing the calculations to see how it works out, to know that it's correct. It's not just balancing your checkbox.
So we have a lot of instructional material and I deleted it because I thought, well, that's overwhelming
It's a
for people
lot.
who aren't math teachers. But for example, in the investing unit, okay, they're learning about stock ownership and transaction data. They use algebraic ratios and proportions to model percent increases, decreases, moving averages, stock splits, and dividend yields. Different broker fee schedules are compared for different stock transactions. Signed numbers, candlestick charts, and line graphs are used to statistically monitor trends and prices.
Lost.
Well, in other words, the stock market is much more accessible to people nowadays. Kids can actually, they shouldn't until they're 18 or older, and they should be very cautious of gambling procedures. However, kids can go online.
Right.
They can become on some Robinhood site or a million other sites now. They can establish a presence. They can bet $100 by buying stock and selling stock very, very quickly. What this is like trying to get them to start understanding like, what is this market really doing? Not just a quick brief analysis, but like, what is the math behind this? So then they learn about randomized designs, hypothesis testing, inferential statistics, interpret supply and demand curves, expense equations, revenue equations, profit equations. These things, honestly, for me personally, not really interested. But my son, who's 16, would be all over this.
And I took a class like this in college, so I think it's pretty impressive if we offer it at the high school level, just for the concept, because like you said,
Yeah.
somebody may think they wanted to be an engineer, but no, maybe they actually wanted to go be an actuary or do something with the stock market,
And we have
right?
juniors that wanna
Yeah.
actually go buy cars and have been saving money and
Exactly.
working, and like, how does that work? And they
Yeah.
don't really know.
Yeah.
It was surprising to me. I taught 8th grade math and we talked about interest, and I used an example of a house I bought previously and I said, this is how much I paid for the house. But if you took all 30 years to pay it off, this was the final cost, and they had no idea about that. And I said, and if you buy a car, they said that should be illegal. They had no idea.
Right.
And so I
And
think
that's at a low interest rate.
Well, and like automobile ownership, it goes on all these things I don't know a lot about, but it also talks about depreciation, right? So
You drive
my
off the lot.
sister-in-law, every time she buys something, has this very because she loves this stuff, has a very fancy spreadsheet, and she will tell you exactly when it's time to sell her car and when to
She tracks it,
she
yeah.
tracks the refrigerator, she tracks the car, she tracks everything. She loves this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And she understands how to set the system up to tell her when it's no longer of great value or when she's made her money's worth out of it. That's an easy way to say it, but it
Yeah.
talks here about arithmetic and geometric sequences, add rates, functions, about how auto insurance is modeled after conditional probability. Kids should actually really know that because there's a code every person gets assigned based on your risk factors.
Right.
Demographics.
And this actually goes through that process, so they might be better informed about their decisions related to their driving practices that will influence their ability to get credit and insurance. And so then it goes through two-way tables, diagrams, irrational functions, parabolas, and all of that's used to model accident deconstruction. So I mean, a kid who's like really into his car or her car or their own finances, which more and more students are actually concerned about their finances. That actually was part of our student survey data 2 years ago. It's part of the trend around concerns around college, is how we're going to pay for it. How am I going to, that's why the life and work class has adjusted. How am I going to pay for my family growing up? That showed up during the listening sessions with students during our strategic plan. So Jeff, you had asked us like, why did we pursue this? Very clearly, we have to have 3 credits of math. We require Algebra 1 and geometry. We've historically required Algebra 2. This group decided that we could create a pathway for students, not require Algebra 2, make it available for students. And what we want to do is make sure that students earn those 3 credits in ways that are productive in helping them move forward. So students who really want to enter a math program of study in college, they can go on and take Algebra 2 and AP this and AP that. But other students, what we want them to do is have productive options. And so things like financial algebra and statistics are 2 really great options for them. And we think that this would be more enticing based on what students have said, both out of the career courses, out of our listening sessions, and out of our interview data about college, barriers to going to college.
So how about fitting it into the school schedule? Is there room for this?
Yeah, that's part of our pathway redesign. So we're shifting the sections, Algebra 2, we won't have like, what, 8 or 10 sections, so however many.
I don't remember.
However many
Something like
sections we typically have of Algebra 2, we'd reduce the number of traditional Algebra 2 sections and replace it with 1 or 2 of these sections. It's the same workload, doesn't change staffing, doesn't require additional people. We purposely wanted to make sure that if we had interest, we had more than 1 person trained, so it's not a person-dependent system.
Do we get will we get a feedback on the results, after a year's use?
We certainly can do that.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
I mean,
And
if we're gonna do it, we should have.
Student
knowledge
grade
about what it
data,
is.
student perception data, and staff data.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, and that's what, on the quote, right? So each year we'll have to renew the mind tap. That's what you said. That's the biggest cost, depending on what we need. Yeah.
But that's so much less than buying
Seriously,
textbooks.
I was
right.
gonna say, the textbooks, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
They're
$185
$185 a piece, and even when I started to calculate how much, if we bought a class set, how many years we'd have to have it to equal, and there was never, it could never catch
And
up.
they have to update with the tax codes, and so it would, just online.
Well, and the online textbook thing is intriguing too. I mean, it's another innovation and allowing
Right.
them to see. I mean, they think they do it already in Google Classroom, but they don't have any
No, it's not the
idea
same.
how much you can do in an online textbook. I was right at the end of that cusp, so it was a
Will say, though,
transition. Yeah.
You have to have a physical copy if there's one available. I mean,
Right, so that, we had 1 down as a physical copy, we're
Yeah.
supposed to also be getting some samples.
for sure.
Some IEPs require that they have a physical copy too, so
Correct.
probably
Right.
1 is not enough, but
Yeah.
that's minimal.
Through our process, we should end up having a handful, but some of them are complimentary.
Perfect.
Nice.
You guys are crafty. I love it.
I think another benefit of this is that we don't want our kids to be suckers for, all kinds of investment opportunities and, and we're gonna
Flashy.
have a whole plethora of new stuff coming down the pike. So we, you need those updates every year.
Yeah.
I remember how many people got caught on APRs, mortgages, right? 2008.
Yep. Totally.
So the kids need to know that the banks are not their friend, the insurance companies are not their friend, they're there to make money. And they're there to return money to stockholders, and so therefore, you have to be savvy. And this gives us basically the vanilla base level of information you need to know. And then they hopefully can start to see, oh gee, that's not really a safe opportunity for me to make money.
So this is like a algebra 2 light.
Yeah, well, I don't know
You could
how
do
light it
like
is, but
people
it
that-
it is.
Like me,
finance.
that didn't do algebra 2 didn't work. This
Because
would've
it's so abstract.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this puts like real life attached to it, and I think that's why we might have more success than just a generic algebra 2. We're trying to give choice. We also want to start off kind of small, like preferably one section, see how it goes, which
See
is a
how-
class,
right. Yeah.
see how it goes, see how the students respond to it, see how the teacher feels about it. And that way, it's also still driven by student choice, so they want to be in the room, they're not mandated to be there. And then, you know, we might be able to continue to kind of balance out traditional algebra 2 with financial algebra as, you know, reduce one, increase the other, but keep the sections the same.
I think when we probably took algebra 1 or 2, we said, when are you ever gonna use parabolas? Why do we have to learn about parabolas? Why do we need to know about inverse variations? And why do I have to know that this graph is inverse variation? This gives meaning to all that abstract math that people learn and avoid.
That would be me.
And a lot of
I
the,
have yet to see algebra ever prove a thing to me, once I went through the course.
Maybe you could audit.
I never used it.
when you look at the units too, they're pretty heavy on like projects or like actual like real life
hands-on stuff.
scenarios.
Yeah.
And so comparing like, okay, you could get this car here, 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 here. And what's gonna be your best deal based on the price, but what can you get for interest rate? And so they were showing us all these different projects. We're like, yep, this is what they all need. This is what some of us adults still need.
Yeah, that's true.
I also noticed, like in the resources that
Yeah, I
I
was just looking at
added in
those.
here that came from the process, like, I mean, these are things that we want our community members accessing, you know, knowing they can access it, like the Kelly Blue Book,
Right.
right? The motor vehicle investigation and crash investigation and reconstruction site, the Federal Reserve, index credit cards. You know, there's lots of very, a loan payment calculator. They need to learn how to do it themselves, but then they also need to learn how a tool can support them in doing that efficiently over time. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The Social Security Administration site is on here, like they're going to be accessing sites that we might actually never have had the kids access. Maybe like one of those or two of those might have been accessed through the career course, but the more frequently they access those sites, the more they become comfortable with them, the more they can self-advocate as adults. And I think that's a great thing for kids and our community.
Right.
Many of our students reside in our community after, you know, at some point in their life. And I don't know, I think that that's a return on our investment.
So I'll say it, put forth a motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion.
Yep, discussion.
I mean, you can tell I'm not enthusiastic about this. I mean, we teach life sciences, right? I mean, we already have courses for kids to learn how to balance a checkbook and these things, right? Is that part of our curriculum already?
Yeah, the basic balance a checkbook, tax, well, I don't even know if it's exactly a
Yeah.
checkbook.
So I'm
It's
a
double
little
checking your
skeptical.
financing.
This
But-
is a little bit more in-depth.
beyond.
And I think the other thing that the benefit of it is it's helping people understand the difference, well, how the abstract math is being used in real life to make decisions about your life.
Yeah. I understand what they're saying, I just. Okay, it's kind of redundant, if you already have classes that cover these subjects using normal, you know, math skills everyone acquires.
Yeah,
It's an interesting thing, I'm not gonna shoot it down, I'm not I would like to see feedback though.
Yeah, I think we can totally generate feedback and use it to inform a future decision. I think going to school is not the same as when you and I went to school. You took Algebra 2 and I took Algebra 2. I hated Algebra 2, you seemingly did too, right? Although I loved trigonometry afterwards, I don't know why, I just figured it out. I know, it's like it clicked and I just loved it.
Never made it there.
But,
Geometry was great, I loved it.
well, see, that tends to happen, right? You like one
Right,
and
you
not
like
the other.
algebra or geometry, usually not both.
Our students, not ours, students don't have the same commitment to sitting through an 80-minute class in a certain way that we might have had. So it's important, I think, that we try to make sure without increasing workload or staffing, that we find ways that say to students, that content is important and here's a way you can learn about it that's relevant. And it will help you in your life. And I think we need to adjust towards that because otherwise they're bored, distracted, skipping, our failure rates are increasing incrementally, and our dropout rate is increasing. We have to do something. This is one thing that we're trying to say, you know what, it feels more relevant and it is intensive Algebra 2 math, but it's with a box that makes more sense to a lot more kids.
And I can,
Think of a coach is bringing it to us, you've heard of it enough to.
Yeah. and I
get
can
there,
say as, last year the literacy coach and I taught reach at the middle school and
Kids are gifted and talented.
we did a unit on the stock market and we did the stock market game with those kids and some of those kids that don't like math at all, they got sucked right in. I'm like, it was just something new and interesting and like learning how you could make money and invest and like it sucked them in. It got them
And let's face
re-engaged.
it, this is the era of YouTubers. People are going online and
Right.
making millions of dollars by making videos and talking nonstop.
Right?
But our students can go on and also they're saying like, oh, I know this person's making X amount of dollars from this many subscribers. And I mean, the kids see the world financially very differently than we do. I don't think it would hurt to provide them opportunities for some foundational financial understanding that isn't driven by a YouTube algorithm.
Right.
We're good with it, I'm good
Yeah,
with it.
I know you're not
I just
being,
don't, we don't need a new position.
No.
Don't increase that, I mean, money is gonna be an issue forever.
I agree. Yeah, this is not to drive a new position in any way, shape, or form, or not to increase workload. It's to supplant another course that became optional.
So will we see it in that curriculum next month? you
Yeah,
think?
so the
Okay,
program of, we wanted to do this before we
Yeah.
do the program of studies.
perfect,
So we'll adjust the program of studies.
Great.
We're finishing fine
Was there
tuning it.
feedback on the name of the course?
yeah, I was just curious. I selfishly, I have a child who may be interested,
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
in that same cohort you're talking about, and I'm gonna test it when I get home and just say, hey, do you know there might be financial algebra, and see what she thinks it is.
And
We can tweak the description.
Yeah.
Yeah,
to
we
make it more
we-
kid-friendly.
this course description won't be what's in the program of studies,
Right.
it's too long.
Yeah, it's a lot,
Make it
right?
more
We'll have to
kid-friendly.
ask the team to create a shorter one that's a little more accessible to all students. I
Cool.
figued you could handle this.
That
course
was my
description.
reading for last.
As adults.
before I went to bed.
Before you went to bed?
And then I went online to the different sites that were
Oh, you did?
offered. The New York Stock Exchange wouldn't come up, it wouldn't work.
Ooh.
Oh, geez.
Well, they
We'll
might have been
to update the
operating
link or
or something.
something.
Yeah, they might have been sometimes, yeah, or it's an HTTPS, one of those deals. That's my life every day, Jeff. Excellent, so we have a motion and a second, we have
We
discussion.
had discussion.
All those in favor? There we go.
Okay.
Thank you,
And
Lindsay.
I will make a note in my little calendar for this committee to maybe after first semester to see if we can gather some data and bring it back around this
Great.
time next year.
Yep.
I'll be curious to see how many kids sign up.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's a great idea.
Yeah.
You guys, it would be helpful, I'm sure, for you to have access to some students every so often, make it a little more interesting.
If you can send me an email after you run it by your
Yeah,
own
I
child
will.
about the title and if we need to go back to the drawing board on the name of it,
Love it.
So
Okay, cool.
even if you had the underneath it, understanding banking,
I
investments,
know, it's like, it's a lot.
mortgages and
Yeah,
car
yeah, yeah.
loans.
Just car loans would
Car
probably
loans,
be
yeah.
enough.
Carlo, yeah,
That's the big one, right?
Right.
That's what lead with that.
Yeah, lead with car.
Oh.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna need that soon, probably.
Yeah.
I
Thank
am
you so much.
logging myself into
Do you still
Zoom,
need me?
Terry.
You are good.
You're good.
Okay,
You're
good,
good.
'cause
You
my
are
kids are home.
free. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Um,
I wasn't badgering you.
No, you're fine.
I wanted to ask.
questions are healthy and welcome. And it also helps make sure.
She got it. Hi, Liz.
So what I'm doing here is, you have in front of you, we're switching gears to the next agenda item, the mid-year assessment results. I gave you a packet and it's front to back. So you'll have to do this, but I'm also going to put it on the screen, so anyone online can see it, and if you wanna see it on the big screen. So I'm just queuing that up.
Are these categories does not meet, partially meets, meets and exceeds? It looks like
Yes,
this, okay.
those are the four categories.
It's EOY.
End of year. Sorry, I was running out of space.
I know. It's all-
Okay. Let's see how we do. Okay, I am going to provide a tiny caveat before we get started. Historically, the winter assessments are frustrating. And here's why. Students are coming back from the winter break. We don't run the assessments that first week because we want kids back into routines and all that. And the level of investment in the middle of year of an assessment for a lot of students is pretty low. The beginning of the year, it's like, oh, the beginning of the year, I'll do whatever you say. And the end of the year, sometimes they want to see growth, right? Depending on how the teacher or team frames it and how they build energy around it and that. But the middle of the year really is not all that interesting for students. And we do tend to see a drop in the middle of the year. I'm not excusing it, I'm just saying it tends to happen. And then we pick up a lot between January and the end of May or June when I present the data. I don't know if that will be the case this year, but that every time I go to do the winter assessment data report, I have that feeling like, oh, let's see how it fell out this year. So let's go through this. Stop with questions at any point. So just for clarity, the high school does not assess in the winter right now. It's optional in terms of the state assessment, the winter one is. And the high school has that end of semester finals or midterm exams in January. So we tend to not want to over test the kids. Those exams are stressful enough as it is. So we tend to not assess. So you will see no high school winter data. We have fall data, which I presented earlier this year, and we will have spring data. So at the elementary level, we use the NWEA in reading. And in the earliest grades, we use a literacy assessment called Early Bird. It's more game-based, more entertaining to them, shorter. And then in math, we use iReady. We use it 3 times a year. It's a diagnostic. And so we do not do the option for the state assessment in the winter because I don't want kids having to take 2 math tests in January. So they just take the iReady so it's consistent through the year. But middle school consistently engages with the NWEA. So that there's a little overlap. There's some tests we take in the fall and the spring that some students don't take in the winter, in other words. So that data gets a little bit skewed. I'll walk us through it. So we're going to start with literacy. This district goal came directly from the strategic plan that you approved, which I do need to get on the website. And the bulleted points are just sort of indicators of where we're at the moment. If you can see that we have a very lofty goal in 2028. I don't know a district that's achieved that yet, but it's a lofty goal. And we're going to try. So in 23 and 24, the end of year district average, so across first grade through 11th through 10th grade, first grade through 10th grade, was 39% in 23, 28% in 24. And in the winter of this year, so we haven't gotten to the end of the year yet, the current average is 36%. So we are ahead of where we've been in the past. Because our 36% and it's mid-year, not end of year. And our kindergarten is from our early literacy screener. It's called a predictor of word reading. I'm going to show you more about it. Historically, at the end of the year, we've been in the 50 percentiles. And mid-year right now, we're at 60 percentile.
Is this the year that we made small kindergarten classes?
Our challenge in kindergarten is that we had a lot of disruption of
Right,
learning.
but smaller gives you more individual.
Yeah, I'd say some of them are a little too small. I think there's a sweet spot.
There is.
But yes,
There is.
we also have, we've also employed a couple new things over the past couple years in literacy in kindergarten and first grade specifically. Teachers are getting really good at it. They love it. They're very invested. And I think that's also part of the growth. Some of our literacy practices are just more fine-tuned. And I'm hoping that will then carry forward year over year for these kids. The more you get a solid foundation, better it is, fewer gaps in the future, we can make progress. That's the theory. Let's hope it stays true.
Right.
Okay, so this is I know it's a little tiny in front of you, so it's also on the screen. I'll walk you through it. This is our winter achievement results. When you see red, that's in the does not meet category. Those are students struggling the most. They're 20th percentile or lower on a normed scale. Orange is, NUIA has 5 categories instead of 4. The state has 4. So they're in the 21st to 40th percentile. Yellow is 41st to 60th percentile, partially meets. Green means they're 61st to 80th percentile, and blue means they're above 80 percentile. So that's an exceeding. Blue means you're exceeding. So in the winter, you can kind of just see from the color ranges where there's more red or where there's more green and blue. And then that little yellow circles going up and down the chart there, that's kind of the normed percentile, achievement percentile for that grade level as compared to all other students taking this test in that grade level across the country. Your goal is to get to 50th or higher in mid-year. So when reading this, we're very, very close to that or at it. 50% of our grade levels met that target, but then you can see there's like grade 2 is at 49th, as is grade 8. So we're very close, but they don't fall into the 50%. I then went and looked into the classroom level data, which I'm not sharing here because I don't share teachers' names, and because then you can start identifying students and it gets tricky. But I did look at them, and the following grade levels had the greatest rate of meeting or exceeding, so the green or blue, that 50% target, and that would be grade 7. 63% of the classrooms met or exceeded our winter target. 63% of the grade 5 classrooms met or exceeded that target, which is fascinating because grade 7 and 5 are historically our most challenging years, besides 3rd grade. And grade 1, 71% of the classrooms met or exceeded. So we have some really excellent pockets that obviously will influence a district average. Just so you're aware, in the buildings, every team, grade level team also looks very closely at their team data as it compares broadly across the district. They don't look at like, Piston doesn't then say, this teacher in HT is knocking out of the park, right? They say, here's my data and here's the district data, so I can compare how close or far apart I am. And then they dig in. What skills are they strong at? What skills do they need to grow in between now and June? And then they make a plan based on that information. Another way to look at this is kind of like a cohorts of students. So I just took the norm data. I went to last winter's group, which is on the left column. And then I took that same cohort of students and put them on the right column, winter 2025. So that's why it says grade 2 in 2024, grade 3 in 2025. It's the same cohort of students as they go up through the grades. And you can see that grade 4 to 5 has had a drop in their achievement. But I also wanted you to notice that they had high growth, because remember, grade 5 had higher achievement in more than 50% of their classroom, 63. They started really low. So they have a drop in achievement. They weren't retaining a lot of the information they learned, but their growth measure is considered high, which is a really good thing for us to help them maybe get to where we want end of year grade level. So while it's a drop, the high growth matters.
Isn't it? I was told that if you're watching achievement, it's not a straight line on a graph. It kind of goes like this anyway. And so when you see a little dip, that's not necessarily a time of concern. When you see a progressive dip, then you concern, but the learning is not a straight line on a graph.
Yeah, that's true. And we see that. And that's, so generally our students, both math and literacy, struggle in like grade 3, grade 5, grade 7. Predictably. And we're working on trying to figure out how do we break that cycle? What needs to happen in advance of those grades? What needs to happen at those grade levels in order to break up that cycle? And then obviously 9th grade didn't take the assessment this winter, so that's why there's a blank next to 8th grade, last year's 8th grade to this year's 9th grade. There's not a significant outlier in the negative, so that's a good thing. I'd love us to break through that 50th percentile at the mid-year and really, because for our collective data to increase, our achievement needs to make more than 1 year's growth in a year, right?
Yeah.
And you need to do that a little bit every year in order to get up to the level of achievement we really want to see. Otherwise, we're going to remain stable for a while. So that's the part that we're still figuring out. Okay, this one's a little messy and I should have printed you off just a page all by yourself. But because I put dots and then I put grade levels and then I scanned it in because I could not get the system to make it the way I wanted it to go because it wouldn't read from one building to another into a district profile. So let me tell you what you're looking at. So you can see the quadrants. And in this quadrant chart, you want your grade level cohorts to show up above the x-axis. Okay, so that would mean that they're having higher growth. Ideally, in the most ideal world, you also want them to show up to the right of the y-axis. So that top right quadrant is really your sweet spot if it's all going really well. Yes. This illustrates that all buildings demonstrated higher growth in grades 2 and 4. So I don't know if you can see it on this thing. I don't think you can because I can't. for example, in the top right quadrant, kind of 1 over 1 up, is a dot and a number 2. So one of our grade 2 cohorts in a building landed there.
Oh,
So there should be 3 number 2s on the chart because
Got
we
it.
have 3 schools with groups of second graders. All of the second grade groups, Pittston, HT, and LER, all show up above the x-axis. So that's great. And same with grade 4. Grade 3 has the greatest variability. But at the same time, it's growing at greater rates than it has historically. Grade 3 has a couple things happening in literacy and math. The expectations shift pretty drastically in the standards. The level of like cognitive demand and rigor shifts pretty significantly in grade 3. That becomes challenging for third graders. Also for us, we tend to have our most turnover in grade 3 staffing wise. They move into a different grade level or they retire. We've only had 1 or 2 over time leave for a different profession. And so that also creates variability, right? It takes 3 solid years of really moving through a curriculum to become quite proficient at it, that repetitive practice and refinement. And then grade 5 is closer to the 50th percent norm than their historical data. So I have the bigger chart here, but
kind of right on that middle axis, isn't it? At the 5.
yeah, grade 5 is right between the
Yeah.
crosshairs.
Yeah.
It goes 5, if there's a 5 just above the x-axis and there's 2 5s below
Got it.
the x-axis.
Yeah.
So they've never been that close. So that's a good sign.
Mhm.
And this is just different ways to look at the data to try to understand, like, what does this mean? So there's promise in that we are getting higher up on the quadrant chart. There means higher achievement and higher growth. But we're not there yet.
Grade 3, this is the grade where we're moving from learning to read to reading to learn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Used to be 4th grade was the cutoff, but now, yeah.
And we've really shifted a lot of our foundational practices. So if you listen to the news and heard the NAEP test, National Assessment of Educational Progress. This past year, we actually weren't selected. We're often selected for that test. We were not, we didn't participate. And it was all over the news like a week ago. The data tanked in Maine, reading and math. And nationally it dropped, but in Maine especially tanked. And then a lot of the news reports said, well, it's because, we weren't doing enough balanced literacy in making sure there's phonics, phonemic awareness, and kind of the historical whole language approach. For us in this district, some of the curriculum that was sort of not spoken of highly as a result of that report being generated, we haven't done. We never prescribed to that. And a number of years ago, you adopted curriculum here, and then we've added some refinements that you've adopted. And those are all the decisions we made, not this year, but in the past, are leading to better results and are the current recommendations that are being made broadly in the field. So we're luckily a couple of years ahead of the game. So hopefully we'll start seeing that taking shape over time, which means their foundational literacy skills will be stronger, which means they should be able to handle the more complex word structures that happen in 3rd grade, as well as the comprehension strategies, hopefully.
So you just
But it
made
takes
an
time.
interesting point. You said that NAEP one is one that you're selected for, so you don't take it.
There's a selection, it's
Okay.
not like, it's supposed to be, I think, a random selection,
sure.
and then I'm sure they do some demographic stuff and the
Got it.
behind the scene to make sure there's a
Yeah.
representation for the state.
Yeah,
And we tend to have 1 or 2 schools participate every year, and other people come in and do the assessment.
that's right. I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, but we just one of the years we happened to not participate,
Yeah.
that we weren't selected.
Very good.
Okay, so I've gotten a couple emails that said, what is our projected proficiency? So NOEA, the state assessment, is also a national assessment available to districts, does have a projected proficiency algorithm, I guess, calculation. So I thought I better be transparent about that. So if students were this is the SAT one. If students were to take the SAT, which we are all familiar with, right?
Mhm.
Okay. If they were to take it in the spring, data from grades 5 through 9 suggest that 57.4% of our students would be on track for a successful outcome. And this is from the fall set. Okay. Not terrible, but not where we want to be, right? We'd want that number to be closer to 70% based on our strategic plan. And if you can read the chart, it's like 60% of our fifth graders. Now, they can't take the SAT and be successful. It's a projected proficiency. If they remain on track with their current data, by the time they're old enough to take the assessment, they would be considered on track or successful with the SAT, 60% of fifth graders versus 55% of current ninth graders. And then that kind of creates an average, and the average is to 57.4%. So not terrible, but not where we want to be. I also went further because there's been questions. So I said, well, what does this look like winter to winter? Because winter, is not my favorite time of year with these tests. So it is a little less. We went from 57% from the fall to winter. It shows in 2024, 54% were projected to be proficient. In 2025, which is now 55.7%. Not significantly different, but still moving in the right direction for improvement. And that's a middle of year projection. Hopefully they'll learn a lot more and we'll have more information in the spring. But I wanted to make sure you had access to that because it's come up. I also wanted to make sure you understood that the early bird literacy assessment that we use, it gets to the key indicators of literacy that result in being able to read proficiently over time. And it provides us a lot of data on very specific elements that are instrumental in helping students learn to read. I didn't provide all of them for you, but if someday you want all of them, happy to do that. So what I pulled out was just sort of the big scores. So this one's kindergarten. Our target in kindergarten for word reading proficiency is 80%. Right now in the middle of the year, that would be the PWR score, we're at 60%. So we are more than on track to meet the 80% goal in the spring. That's good. Also, this test is a screener for dyslexia. Dyslexia can become a diagnosis, but this is not a diagnosis. All this is saying is that there are components of literacy that influence a student's ability to read, and some of those components are key indicators for dyslexia. And it's flexible when kids are learning to read. You can change the outcome. So we screen for it so that we pay attention to which students are flagged so that we hone in on those indicators and help them become proficient at them, which reduces the number of students who might be flagged later on. Make sense? And a diagnosis for dyslexia can't happen through an assessment like this.
Yeah.
It's just a flag.
Yeah.
So from the beginning of the year, we went from 48% not having a flag up to 57% not having a flag. So you see how we're making progress. So that's very good.
Do we have reading specialists for that age group?
Yes, we do. Yep. And then just another way to look at it, since I figured you all knew letter names and letter sounds, and you know how important that is to reading. So I drew those out for you. At the beginning of the year across kindergarten, we've gone from, so you want the white box. The dark blue is their most challenged, the light blue is their kind of middle of the road. We call them tier 1, 2, and 3. Letter names from 74% to 84% proficient. Letter sounds from 60% to 84% proficient. That's
Wow.
fantastic. Letter sounds is hugely instrumental in understanding reading. And then oral sentence comprehension is hearing, interpreting, responding.
Mm.
And it usually has multi-steps. So we've gone from 64% to 80%, which is excellent. They need to hear it before they can read it, right? They need to be able to process orally before they can start processing in print. So we're making really great growth. And then we also run this assessment in first grade. It's slightly different for first graders. But PWR is that predictive reading score again. We've gone from 19% to 44% in first grade. So we're getting there. Our word reading is what we really want to end with. Went from 24% to 46%, so we've almost doubled the number of students proficient at word reading at mid-year first grade. Non-word reading is super important because it means they're breaking apart words, listening for discrete sounds, and taking them apart and putting them together, which means they'll be good at longer, more complex words and not try to just read the beginning of the word and guess the rest of it. They'll actually attack it, which is what we want. So they're going from 31% to 69% in first grade.
Wow.
That is phenomenal
You know why?
because we're working on it, because we actually know how to teach it now.
Something must have worked. Right?
Yep, they're spending a lot of, we have built up, our kindergarten and first grade teachers are phenomenal and they are really honing in on all these key indicators and have resources now
Mhm.
to help them teach it. And we don't drag it on. We do, we do it based on their attention span, and it's been fun and interesting and kids see the success. And so I think it's growing. And then then what we do is take those discrete skills and apply them in, we call it continuous text, little books. Predictable
Yep,
books moving to authentic books.
that's awesome.
It is awesome. Okay, math, and we'll try to go a little quicker. Goal. We have less available data for this particular goal at this particular point in time, and it's not as promising. So those are end of year data points, and we have mid-year data points. So in K-5, we're actually on track to have a very similar outcome as previous years, and what we want is a increased outcome.
Yeah, right.
So we have fewer math resources in terms of instructional support available. So we're working with what we got to figure out how we can adjust this. Couple ways to look at this. Remember, in elementary school, we're using iReady. So the blue line is our fall data, and the red line is our winter data. And you want the red line to be higher than the blue line. And it is. But in fifth grade, I wish it was a little further
A little
apart.
further, right? Mhm.
Make sense?
Yep.
The next one, I took winter from last year to winter to this year. Different kids, not the same cohorts. So as I said, we've had a lot of disruption in kindergarten and in a lot of spaces because of some struggle with learning how to learn in school with boundaries and regulated behavior. I think that has definitely impacted our learning, but it's getting so much better.
Behavioral problems.
In most of the classrooms, not all, and that should allow for increased growth. So
would you interpret this graph, 0 was at 53 and that same cohort is now at 29?
yeah,
That's the same cohort though. That's a big, that's a
Wow.
big.
no, they're at 33. But yes,
Okay.
that's a big drop.
That is a big drop.
We're trying to
Oh, I see what you, yep.
Yep, we're
got it.
trying to figure it out.
Yep.
So that's unnerving.
Mhm.
But the kindergarten expectations and first grade expectations are pretty different.
Yes,
Right.
right.
But still a little
Yeah,
unnerving.
you expect dips when you start something
Sure.
really complicated.
Yeah.
That could be the foundation for something else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You gotta know we don't, sitting here, we don't know where the dips are expected, but
yeah.
Yep.
On this one, I just, third grade is actually promising. And fifth grade is just, something we gotta keep working on. Figuring out why it's so challenging.
What's your stability of teachers in fifth grade?
Pretty stable,
I was gonna say pretty
Yeah.
solid.
yep. It's always been a challenge for us. Remember how I said we have growth goals? So you want high growth, you want 50% or higher. So 70% of our kindergarten classrooms met those growth goals. 57% in grade 1, 88% in grade 2 of our classrooms. So our K-2 space is doing great. And again, we struggle in 3rd and 5th grade.
Nobody met the goals.
No, individuals met the goals.
Right.
But
Collectively as
cohorts,
whole classrooms, did the cohort as a classroom make 50% growth? And then they get counted towards the number of classrooms by grade level, and the answer would be unfortunately no. And we're trying to understand why. Disappointing. Again, I moved Lindsay to the middle school and high school, so they do not have the ongoing daily support. I was hoping that we were stable enough, but this is not a new teacher problem, because I looked there to see like, not a fault of a new teacher, just to be clear, like it's hard to teach something new, right? There's no pattern.
Yeah.
So we're still, the buildings are working on it, teachers are working really hard. I went and observed a number of 3rd grade classrooms, the instruction was fantastic. So I think we gotta still unpack that.
But that being said, the win for K-2, I feel like over the last 2 or 3 years,
It's getting stronger and stronger.
it is, it's building its way in. And we had to put things in place, like you mentioned.
So maybe next year, 3rd grade will be much
Yeah.
higher.
Yeah,
I mean, we're gonna pay really close attention and try to provide as much support as we can. I will say we've leaned into literacy heavier because we have more resources where we feel like if kids can't read, they're not gonna be able to do math because of the word problem issue.
right.
So that could be influencing this a little bit. This is promising. So I flipped a script.
Wow.
So does not meet, remember those are the reds.
Yeah.
The dark colors, the kids who are struggling persistently. It's the hardest group to move because they have so many gaps, right? So obviously kindergarten, you won't have enough data to
Yeah, you
show.
won't have.
So from the fall, let's look at 2nd grade. From the fall, 32% of our classes, students in grade 2 fell in that category. 32, that's a third of our 2nd graders at the beginning of the year. And only 12% in the winter.
Wow.
So 20% of the 2nd grade class moved up in their proficiency, so increased their skill. That's phenomenal. And you look at 4th and 5th grade, if we can continue any sort of trend, we might be able to break through that 5th grade challenge we're
Right.
having.
Right.
To move that many out of red is just amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing, but you can see it's only a 7% shift in 3rd grade. So that's again, like, what is happening? I have had people come in and look.
I mean, the
using-
standards for 3rd grade,
I think it's the standards, because we're using 2 different resources and I'm trying to see if there's a pattern of outcome with that. There is not.
what are the new skills that they're learning? in third grade?
Multiplication.
Multiplication,
Division.
fractions to a greater degree, decimals get introduced, and division.
And see, these are all introduced, and so they're introduced in year 3, and they're probably not really mastered until year 4. And so that's why I think you might expect a
I
dip
think some
there.
kids need more time, which is why 4th grade ends up getting high,
Gets high,
they get a
catch on
lift.
and then they go.
Yeah,
These percentages are individuals that have changed or the averaging across the class?
so if you have 118 2nd graders, let's say 100. If you had 100 2nd graders, 32 of them were in the does not meet category, and now only 12 of them are.
Okay, so you're measuring individuals that have changed.
Yeah, grade
Yeah.
level, the whole
So
grade
it's-
level.
So there's 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade is huge growth in the most challenging population. So that's a good sign. That's what you wanna see. We just wanna see it in the other 2 grade levels too.
Right.
That would be tier 3 in intervention.
So they're usually getting a math class plus a math interventionist or a math special ed specialist. So they're getting double math usually.
Oh.
They're not all special ed students though, and that's why they see the
But if they're just
interventions.
filling, if they're filling holes and that hole gets filled and as they move along, they don't have holes, then you're good.
Yeah, but if you think about third grade and how much new information is added,
Tons.
yeah, I think that's our challenge. We
Nobody
gotta.
likes fractions, decimals and percents.
And then just quickly, I went into the middle school and did the winter to winter, same cohort of kids, so sixth grade last year to seventh grade this year, they're on track. You know, what we'd like them to be is accelerating, right? But at least they're not dropping. Seventh grade to eighth grade, they've had a little bit of growth. Which actually really surprised me, so I'm kind of hopeful there. And then this is, you know, they're close to the intersection there, the X and Y axis for grades 6, 7, and 8, but I would like to see that bump up above the
Yeah.
above the X axis.
Gotcha.
And we are refining interventions in middle school at all levels. They are trying to think of ways to practice more, and really our biggest challenge is building student motivation and purpose for engaging in math.
It's hard though when you've got certain parents that don't.
Yeah, like.
Yeah, there's a lot of persistent challenges. And just because I promised you I'd give this to you, the SAT projected proficiency data, because it's been coming, it's not good in math.
Oh, wow, 23.
It's the opposite of literacy.
Do you feel like though, this is a silly question, I'm not an educator, so you can tell me. NUIA, is it structured in a way that it's like an SAT? Or
Not
is it-
anymore.
So,
I
I
mean, the
mean-
old SAT, yes, but the new SAT,
That's what
it's
I'm
so different.
saying, it's so different, so it's hard to, but I get what they're,
I
Yeah.
don't know, people have asked for this particular thing, our literacy is is decent with
Yeah.
room for improvement, our math is not, what I need to do is the problem is not all of our students take SAT anymore.
well, that's the other thing, right?
So I can't, it's like taking the SAT data that we can have access to is from a very small group of students who really wanna take the SAT.
Right. And then how do
So
you
it's not
track
a
it back
fair
to what
sampling.
cohort
I can't
and
compare
when?
the two.
It's not
Yeah.
fair sampling.
And so I'm happy to dig into this, I just don't know how yet, so I just did another winter to winter.
Yeah,
It went from 16% to 17%, so.
this is where I kind of am
negligible.
like, I appreciate it, but in my head, they don't equate to a good comparison, but if somebody asked, I hear why you're sharing it.
I mean,
so
the
appreciate-
literacy does more so just because they tend to, besides the writing, they tend to have
Right.
similar things. I don't know, maybe they do, maybe the math teachers can look at it a little more closely with me once we get spring data. I think
Yeah.
I'd like to dig I bet they have some ideas. I would like to see improvement here, obviously.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
who doesn't?
I wonder how closely the math curriculum correlates to real world understanding experience, the relevancy.
Mhm.
And that's why this new financial.
Right.
Or is
Back
this-
to
I will add that question and see what we can find out. And then we do know that there are certain areas we're adjusting where geometry is being taught at the elementary school because it is influencing the
Geometry is
outcomes.
weak everywhere.
Because it's always done at the end of the year.
Always.
So we're bringing it in, we're weaving it in more
Oh, nice.
intentionally
And
earlier.
statistics and probability is often weak.
And they're working on that too. So just so you know, we know there are challenges. We are trying to get better at it. I'm hopeful that June data that I will share with you is more promising. Although the literacy data has some promise and pockets of the math data has promise. I was just wishing it was a little higher. I don't have comparisons to other districts in our region right now. I sometimes am able to secure those and give those to you as part of the annual presentation, which is usually either June or the beginning of the fall. Sometimes I don't get access to it till the summer, and then I give you a fall update,
When you say in our division, what does that mean?
like our region. So when you think about Coney and Brunswick and Skowhegan and Messalonsky and a couple other districts that might have similar size, I try to access
And
their data.
socioeconomic?
Yep,
Brunswick's not.
no, but they're nearby and people like to look at them.
And
So
Skowhegan would be similar, yeah.
their free and reduced lunch rate's much higher than
Higher,
ours.
yeah. Makes sense. Well, thank you. Lots of
Yeah,
information.
sorry, I know that went a little
Interesting.
longer than I thought, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I do have a question. Did you have a chance to look over the results of the science test? You said you were gonna unpack it?
Yeah, did I do that in the fall? It came in late. I feel like I did. Let me find that for you. It should be posted and I will pull it and
Yes,
get it
because
for
I think
you.
I even emailed you that question too, and I think that's what we determined, but we'll find the one that you can look at, Joanne. I did ask for
Science assessment.
that. Yeah.
They take the assessment in this year, April for the high school and May for the middle school and at fifth grade. We tend to not get the results till like October.
Yeah, which is ridiculous because how do you
Right.
make
How do you
changes?
use it,
It's an
right?
online, but let me pull that.
Okay,
Not only that, but I think the quicker you get the results and the students can see it, the more meaningful it is.
well, if they can figure out where they're having a problem,
Yeah, I
You know,
think
what
we're adjourned.
answers they got
Otherwise,
wrong.
we're all set, Terry. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Sorry, they really-
4:41,
they got-
4:42.
They gotta log you in, the
Yep.
next one.